first step to understanding chord theory is to learn the major scale, the minor scale, and what's called a fifth, or a power chord. The major and the minor scale are used to create melodies, chords, and chord progressions. A chord progression is the shifting of chords up or down throughout either key. Up, down. And the major and minor scale are what those chords are shifting based off of most of the time. To play the minor scale, you're going to play the 5th fret of low E with your pointer finger, 7th fret of low E with your ring finger, 8th fret of low E with your pinky. Then you're going to go to the A string and do the exact same fret and finger assignment. Pointer on 5, ring on 7, pinky on the 8th fret of all on the A string. The last note is going to go back to the low E string, and you're going to play the 3rd fret with your pointer, and then you can replay the first note. 5 on E, 7 on E, 8 on E, 5, 7, and 8 on A, 3rd and 5th fret on the low E string. The major scale is played with your 5th fret of the E string, played by your middle finger, 7th fret on E, played with your pinky, 4th fret on A, played with your pointer finger, 5th fret of A with your middle, 7th fret of A with your pinky, 2nd fret of E back to low E string with your pointer, 4th fret of low E with your ring finger, and then 5th fret of low E, which is your starting note, with your pinky. And then you can just reset. 7 on E, 4, 5, 7 on A, and then back to low E for 2, 4, and 5. Each note in the key is counted. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, back to 1. The term for that is intervals. The counting of each note in the scale is called intervals. A chord progression is identified by its position in either key. So if I begin a chord on note number 1 of the key, that chord would be called number 1. If I was to begin a chord on the 3rd note of either scale, that would be called chord 3. The chord shape we're going to use to make our progressions is called a fifth, also known as the power chord. The power chord is achieved by starting on a given note. We'll start on the 7th fret of the low E. To make this note a power chord, I would go up 2 frets and then 1 string to the floor. So if my starting note is the 7th fret of low E, my second note will be the 9th fret of the A string. And I could use my pinky or ring finger for that chord. So again, if I started on the 5th fret of low E, and I want to make this note a power chord, I would go up 2 frets and 1 string to the floor. So my first note is low E, fret 5. My second note is A string, 7th fret. Pointer on low E, ring or pinky on the higher note. The first thing you have to understand to make a chord progression is that each interval can be the lowest note of its own power chord. Each note in either key is going to be the beginning point of a power chord. So if I'm starting on the first note of the minor scale, to make that a power chord, I would do, like we said before, 2 frets up and a string to the floor. I want to make the power chord on the second note in the scale. Then the 3rd note of the scale, 8 on E, 10 on A, 5th fret, or 5th fret of A is the 4th position in the key. 5th part of the key, 6th chord in the key, and then our last chord in the minor scale, the 3rd fret of Start on the 3rd fret, 2 frets up, 1 string to the floor. 3 on E, 5 on A. You might want to get your ring finger up to strength as well. Rotate them out. We've just played every power chord in the minor scale. It's good to do the same in the major scale. That's every chord, every power chord in the major scale. And again, when you use power chords to make progressions, you're rarely adding notes outside of the key. That's why power chords work so easily for what we're talking about, studying just the shifts of chords in keys. Later on, we'll learn when those chords are major or minor, but that's the next phase. First, we just want to study how each chord in each key how each interval in each key can be its own chord, and that those chords are numbered 1 through 7. The power chord is the best chord to start with, as it has no tonality, meaning it's not major or minor by itself, and it rarely adds notes to the key. Now that we've played every power chord in both keys, let's talk about making our own progression. There are basically 3 steps to doing this. First step is the easiest. You choose which key you're going to use. Major is happy. Minor is not. Step 2 is to start on the first interval in either key. So let's assume we're going to do the minor scale. There's the first interval of the minor scale, fret 5 on low E. So I'm going to make that a power chord. There we go. 2 frets up and a string to the floor. Once I'm there, I'm going to shift to any other point in the key that I care to do. In this case, I'm going to go to the 3rd note in the minor scale. 1, 2, 3. 8th fret of the E string is my 3rd interval in the minor scale. So I want to make that a chord by doing the power chord, which would be the 10th fret of the A string, on top of the 8th fret of the E string. So 1st chord, 3rd chord, and then from there I'm going to go to the 4th note in the scale. 1, 2, 3, 4. There it is. There's chord number 4. So 1, 3, 4, and I'm going to go to 6 from there. 1 chord, 3 chord, 4 chord, 6 chord. That's 6 chord because 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Now I'm making a power chord on that point. So to recap the steps, you want to choose a scale, minor in this case. From there, you want to begin by creating your power chord on the 1st note of the scale. Starting on interval 1, then you make a power chord. From there, all you're really doing is sliding that power chord to different points of the key. In this case, I shifted from 1 to 3 to 4, then to 6. Power chords are limited, but there are a lot of genres that use them, rock and punk. The second step is to begin on the 1st note of the scale that you've chosen, making that note a power chord by starting from the 1st note, going up 2 frets and a string to the floor. That note is the note that turns your 1st note into the power chord. So once we have our 1st interval turned into a power chord, we choose another place to go. We just slide the power chord somewhere else in the key. In this case, we're going to go to the 3rd note in the scale. Then I'm going to go to the 4th note in the scale. So this is the 4th chord because I've turned the 4th note, 1, 2, 3, 4, into a power chord by going 2 frets up and a string to the floor. That addition to my 4th note gives me a chord, gives me a power chord. So 1, 3, chord number 4, chord number 6 is going to be our next choice. So once you have 4 chords in total, you want to end up with 4 different chords. You don't want to repeat. I recommend not going 1, 3, back to 1. Your goal right now is to experience all of the different chord progressions that you can in both keys. There's only 7 notes in each key, so it's only a matter of time before you experience most of the progressions and start to memorize them. The third step to making your chord progression would be to play each chord for 1 measure. And the simplest way to explain doing that for right now is that you're going to play each chord 4 even times. 2, 3, 4. Switch. 2, 3, 4. Make those switches even. Don't let yourself play too fast so that you're fumbling around to get to your chord. Make sure that they're just as even as anything else. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Make sure that you understand the position of each chord in your progression. In our case, we did a 1, 3, 4, 6. It's important that you know what your progression is, because the next step is going to build directly off of that. There are a lot of patterns revealed by intervals.